All right, the chair sees a quorum now. The Honorable Ken Worthy joined us. I'm Dale Devon, State Representative from St. Joe County, District 5, which happens to be the home of the Fighting Irish. We'll go around the room and introduce ourselves.
I'm Emma Blackwell, Youth Representative.
Good morning. I'm Senator Stacy Donato. I represent District 18.
Jennifer Dorfmeyer, Director, DCS.
Good morning. Sarah Sailors, Director for the Division of Mental Health and Addiction.
Terry Decker, Executive Director, Division of Youth Services, Department of Correction.
Good morning, Chris Naylor, Executive Director, Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
Chad Raney, State Budget Director.
Good morning, Dana Kenworthy, Court of Appeals.
And Mark Fairchild, Commission Executive Director.
With that being said, I know in the past two meetings, we've had an interim director as now officially the director of DCS, Jennifer. No pressure, but we put a lot of expectation.
I'm going home.
All right, thank you for everybody coming. Let's look at the next item on the agenda, which is our minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right. Next, we do have initiatives from Child Abuse Prevention Initiatives. I think April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and it's actually nationwide. So I got to travel a little bit and see the windmills, the little blue and silver windmills around the country, actually down in Florida and Alabama areas. So people were flying them well. So if you have one, fly one. If not, get one. It's important that we keep putting a spotlight on child abuse and prevention. So with that, I think we have a presentation from Shannon Schumacher, and we thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? I'm on the shore side. So yes. Thank you so much for having us. And this very special month, which is Child Abuse Prevention Month across the country. Actually, it's worldwide, but in Indiana, we're doing all kinds of initiatives. And I'm just glad that we were able to be here and tell you about what PCAIN is and what we're doing across the state. I have a PowerPoint. Where do I point it? Over here. Okay. Just keep pushing buttons until something happens. There we go. Okay. Yes. So my name is Shannon Schumacher, and it's my honor and privilege to serve as two areas, the CEO of the Villages of Indiana, and then also the Executive Director of Prevent Child Abuse Indiana. So Prevent Child Abuse Indiana is the Indiana chapter that's affiliated with Prevent Child Abuse America. And there are 38 states who have a chapter. Every chapter looks a little bit different, but we are all absolutely focused on preventing child abuse and neglect in all its forms. So we'll go to the next slide. So a little bit about our mission and values. So our mission here in the state of Indiana is that all children have the opportunity to thrive for the most part, and that abuse and neglect is prevented, families are supported, and have the resources that they need. Our values, I think, are very important. Valuing children. I grew up in Indiana, and I know that is a very strong value that we have. Also supporting families. All of us are in a family in some sort or another, and those family structures can be straining, and supporting those families is part of our values. And then community. I mean, it really does take a village to raise a child. We all know that. If any of us have children or been around children, we know it does take a lot, for sure. Okay. Just keep clicking until something happens. Here we go. Woohoo. Okay. You know, before I go through the numbers, because actually I think I clicked it too many times. Look at that. Now it's all going. It's all going at once. There we go. Okay. So those are the chapters across the country. And you can see us here in Indianapolis, but you'll hear more about our statewide presence in a little bit through this presentation. You know, a lot of people ask me, how did you get into this work, Shannon? What drew you to this work? And, I always feel compelled to tell the story of Natalie. So I grew up, like I said, in Indiana. Actually, I grew up in rural Indiana in the 70s. Looks like some people might be able to relate to that here. And in my second grade class, it was, I'm going to say Mrs. G's class, and Natalie was in my class. And Natalie would come to school, hair matted, very, very thin. Now, in retrospect, malnourished for sure. She couldn't sit still. She was, you couldn't really engage with her on the playground. The other little kids didn't really have much to do with her. She, in retrospect, I saw some of her behaviors now as probably signs of sexual abuse. Mrs. G didn't deal with Natalie very well. Mrs. G didn't have the tools, honestly, probably the frame of mind to really deal with Natalie. A lot of my memories of Natalie early on were Mrs. G just putting her back in her seat. Just get back in your seat, get back in your seat. And I remember one particular day, Mrs. G actually flung Natalie into the closet. And it was quite violent, and we were all watching. And I just have to say, something in my 7-year-old brain clicked. And my thought was, this is not Natalie's fault. And from that day forward, Natalie was right there with me at the lunch table. And my career, all that I have done throughout my 50-some years of life with my work, and a lot of what I do is around how do we protect children, how do we support families, and how do we rally communities around children. And so very, very dear to my heart. I think of Natalie a lot. I wish I had a story to tell about where Natalie ended up. She vanished from the community after a couple of years. I think I lost track of her in fourth grade, but she was my lunchtime companion for sure. So, all right, let's talk about the numbers. The numbers are always difficult because these aren't numbers, these are children. These are families. So when you think about the state of what's happening in Indiana in terms of abuse and neglect, and I think another thing that's really important about the numbers is that we need to be data driven in what we decide to do, where we put the money, where we put the resources, where we put the time. None of us have endless resources, and to really understand what is causing child abuse and neglect, what kind of impact can we have to prevent it? Very, very important to base it on data. So some of the data here, we know that 16,000, which is shocking. You think about, how many children that really is. Last year, I had an open DCS case, meaning there was substantiated abuse and neglect on that child. The other thing that we know is there are over 200,000 reports to the childhood abuse and neglect line. That there's the reports are many, and each one of those reports, there's an investigation, and hopefully some folks get some resources. The one thing we also know it's very important when we look at all the data is that contributing factors to childhood abuse and neglect, poverty is a big one. It's a big, big one. And we know that 15% of children in the state of Indiana are living under the poverty line. So these are stressed families. So these are absolutely stressed families who are living in poverty. Every day they have to make decisions around where to get food, what to, and actually, what kind of childcare can I afford? Where can my child go to school, et cetera, transportation, and on and on. We know childhood abuse and neglect, the factors that we see in families, domestic violence. Any of you, and I know obviously I'm preaching to people who care very deeply about this, but the fatality report, when you see the domestic violence pieces in that, we see it obviously in the children in the Department of Child Services, substance use disorder. If you think about neglect in a lot of ways with substance abuse, if you are not in your right state of mind, trying to figure out where that 2-year-old is really difficult. So mental health issues, we see that a lot with parents with mental health issues, depression, postpartum depression, food insecurity. A lot of the children who are who are victims of neglect have to do with malnutrition. I mean, I think about Natalie, and she absolutely was not being fed properly. I know because of the family's poverty. I do know in Natalie's family too, there was domestic violence that I heard from later as I was older. So, you know, you start to see a lot of patterns. And to those of us who have been in the field a long time recognize the patterns. Health issues, we do see children with health issues and behavioral issues, mental health issues, and they can be very difficult for families to handle. And we do see that a lot. A couple of other things, and this one you already know, this is always the sad one, but we had 59 children who died in 2024 because of maltreatment. And that is, that's a lot. And one is a lot, but 59 is incredibly high. And the state of Indiana often has when you look at the population, a pretty high fatality due to maltreatment. A couple of things also to consider, and this is where really when we think about what we're focusing on in terms of our resources, is 71% of the children who died due to maltreatment were under the age of 3. You know, little kids are hard to handle. Little kids, you have to pay absolute 100% attention. And that's difficult. It's difficult for all of us. I mean, any of us who have been a parent know you turn your head and the 18-month-olds, where are they? So very, very difficult. So thinking about resources around the very youngest of our Hoosier children is also very important. Okay, let's see. Oh, let's see if this works. Look at that. Okay. So now actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about our prevention framework. So Prevent Child Abuse Indiana has a framework. Again, we really have to focus. Again, there are a lot of things we could work on, but we have to stay focused. And so and you'll hear, we're going to talk about each one of these, but our advocacy is really, really important. We do a lot of advocacy. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Awareness. Many people have no idea. I mean, sometimes when I tell people 16,000 children had a substantiated abuse and neglect case in the state of Indiana, just jaw drop. Many people have no idea the extent of the issue. So awareness around what is happening. Education. And these kids aren't born with a manual, no user manual. That would be nice. That would be nice if everyone came with a little, this is my individual treatment, is my plan. Here's my owner's manual. We know that's not the case. Parenting doesn't come naturally to most everybody. And you've seen people who just like, how do you even talk to a 3-year-old? What do you ask? I mean, so a lot of it is about education as well. Partnership. We cannot do this alone. And one of our main focus areas is partnering with all kinds of community providers, state agencies, companies, etc. Local support. So you'll hear about our local support. If you think about how you address prevention of child abuse and neglect in different parts of the state. I mean, you can't just cookie cut like, here's, gun safety in Indianapolis as opposed to gun safety in rural Decatur County where I grew up. It's going to look real different. So I'm really making sure that we're working with the local communities around what they're facing, what will work in their community, et cetera. So you'll hear more about that. And targeted focus. Again, limited resources. What's the biggest, the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak? How do we really focus on preventing abuse and neglect? And you're going to hear the youngest of Hoosiers is really, really important in this aspect. So one more slide and I'll turn it over. Okay, advocacy. So a lot of my job actually is advocating. And I talk to a lot of people who can make decisions and can provide resources and can influence policy that will help prevent child abuse and neglect. And actually, this is a picture and you're going to hear more about this, I know. We 2 years ago advocated for Indiana to have a safe baby courts team legislation, and that went through, and we're super excited about it. And it really will improve outcomes for, again, the smallest of our children. Childcare. Y'all know about childcare. I know you've been involved in that too. That was a huge, huge piece of what Prevent Child Abuse Indiana was focusing on. I think I feel like we should stand up and give an ovation on this one for sure. We think about, and many people don't think this, but having access to affordable childcare is one of the best preventative factors to keep children safe and preventing child abuse and neglect. And many of us can think about that, right? It's just like if you're, a desperate mother who has to go to work and you are going to lose your job if you don't find childcare, and you're just like, okay, my 8-year-old can take her, or the neighbor next door can take her. And, so much of this has to do with just desperate decisions. And I think about, since December of 2024, babies born since that time have not in the state of Indiana had access to subsidized childcare. We don't know where they are. We don't know what's happening. And so we are so happy that we are seeing some movement in that area to help with childcare. And many, I know with the childcare issue, a lot of people didn't think about child abuse and neglect as part of the issue, but it is a big issue with not having access to childcare. So, okay, so advocacy, you'll probably hear more from us, and this is a big piece of what we do, but I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Probst. So Dr. Probst is going to talk to you about the rest of what we do at PCANG more locally, and she is the director of our PCANG team.
Shannon, just quick,
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for Shannon before she moves on?
I know you all know a lot of these things, but yes, very good. Thank you. Dr. Probst.
Thank you. So my name is Nicole Probst. I'm the Senior Director of Childhood Development and Safety at the Villages, and I oversee our Prevent Child Abuse Indiana program. So as Shannon previously mentioned, raising awareness is a big piece of what we do. A lot of people are unaware of the abuse and neglect occurring in their communities. They think it's not happening in my backyard. Trafficking, that could never happen in my community. The reality is it's happening everywhere across the state. And so a big focus for Prevent Child Abuse in Indiana is raising awareness of what is happening so then people can be more diligent in providing prevention services to families at risk, as well as becoming more educated in how to identify when intervention is needed so that they know, oh, maybe I should report this to the Department of Child Services so intervention can begin. So we do this a couple of different ways, but primarily it is through networking with our community news stations to get information out there. So we not only, while we are located primarily in Indianapolis as far as like our office, we actually do PSAs and announcements at news stations all across the state. Earlier this month, I was at a 5 a.m. call in Fort Wayne for a live news segment. So we try and really spread the awareness, not just centrally, but across the state to ensure that everybody is aware of kind of the trends, the issues, and our focus at Prevent Child Abuse Indiana. So another piece, like Shannon mentioned, is our education. So this is kind of, I almost want to say it's twofold. So we do a lot of education on recognizing the signs, what are the risk factors of abuse and neglect. So we do a lot of recognizing and reporting training. We do child exploitation training. We also do some more targeted training. So within the last year, we've been doing really targeted internet safety training, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But that training we provide to both community members as well as middle school and high schoolers. And all of our trainings are completely free of charge. And again, we travel all across the state. We do them virtually, we do them in person. And then we also have trainings geared towards parents. So we have a Nurturing Fathers program where we offer free parent education to fathers. It's an 8-week course, and they meet online. So anybody across the state can join our Nurturing Fathers program, because as Shannon mentioned, nobody has that like guide, that process of how to raise a child safely. It's kind of challenging. And when you've got all these confounding risk factors, it makes it hard. And so being able to support families is really critical. And these are just a few of our trainings. We offer a variety more beyond this, but education is extremely important to us for communities and parents. So partnership, another big piece of what we do is we try to work in partnership with many organizations across the state, both at the state level and at the local levels as well. One of our big partners is Healthy Families of Indiana. So Healthy Families is the leading program of Prevent Child Abuse America. So it is actually their flagship program. And so the Villages of Indiana also serves a number of counties for Healthy Families Indiana. And we also partner with various programming for that as well. So just this past week was the Institute for Strengthening Families, which is open to beyond just Healthy Families Indiana, but we went and presented at that and did our Safe Tots training, which goes over a variety of things to ensure toddlers are safe. But we are always looking to expand our partnerships and have better collaboration and sharing of information to ensure that we are targeting the most vulnerable population, which is our children. So local support. This is how PCANE operates. This is what we do. So as Shannon mentioned earlier, there's 38 plus chapters across the US. Every chapter looks a little bit different. In the state of Indiana, we really focus on targeted local support and intervention because, as she mentioned earlier, something in Marion County versus a LaGrange County, that's going to be a totally different approach, right? And so we work with local community groups to support their local councils. So we actually charter with different community organizations in all the various counties that you see here to support their local prevention efforts. And we do this a couple of different ways. We provide them technical support, training, education, collaborative convening meetings. And then we also have provided them resources and education on how to implement the framework. So developing those community action plans that are targeted to the specific needs of that community so that they can be successful. We have a statewide council engagement manager that's kind of our liaison for all of these various councils. And then we also participate in their events. So April being Child Abuse Prevention Month, my team has been traveling all across the state for events to support our local efforts as well. So kind of the concept here is that we're all working together and not in silos because we're all seeing similar trends and issues, but maybe the approach on how to tackle them is a little bit different. Okay, and next is our targeted focus. So at Prevent Child Abuse Indiana, for about the last year, we have had a targeted focus, and it is referred to as our Eyes on the Child campaign. So we've looked at some data and statistics over the last couple of years and identified some pretty serious issues around supervision. Now, at the forefront, sometimes people don't think of supervision as abuse and neglect. I was actually just talking with a community member the other day who saw our Water Watcher badge, and he was like, how is a Water Watcher badge connected to abuse and neglect? And so we had a really great conversation about the supervision piece of it all. So our Eyes on the Child campaign is twofold in that it is focused on internet safety and water safety. Water safety is the #1 cause of unintentional death in children ages 1 to 4. Unfortunately, this is an issue all across America, but also here in Indiana. In Indiana, recent data said that 88% of fatalities related to drownings, there was an adult present. So this is a supervision issue. And the concerning part of it is when we're having a pool party or a beach party or those kinds of things, everybody's watching the children, nobody's watching the children. It's a big issue. When I was a fatality specialist with the Department of Child Services up north where I'm from, I had a really hard investigation where a little girl drowned on her birthday. Everybody was there. It was a big community get together for her birthday, and nobody was watching the kids. Everybody was watching the kids. And unfortunately, she passed. So our water safety focus is educating parents on the supervision piece. We are giving out Water Watcher badges free of charge to anybody in the state of Indiana. And what it is a physical representation and visual reminder of who's responsible for watching the child. So whoever's wearing it knows I'm not on my phone, I'm not chatting with my friends or family members. I'm responsible for watching the children in the water. And when I need to take a break, I physically hand that off to the next person, right? It's a very clear reminder to everybody of who is responsible and also to the children. They know if something goes wrong, that's the person watching us right now. I need to go to that person. So that is just one of our tools. The other tool that we are doing, and that accompanied with that, I should mention, is a very targeted water safety training to go over some of the things that we don't think about, like the color of your bathing suit. And how visible is that underwater? Draining a bathtub as soon as bath time's over because it only takes an inch of water to drown. And then on the other side of it is internet safety. So we have partnered with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as well as Indiana's Crimes Against Children Task Force to bring about some targeted training. So NetSmarts is a training developed by NECMEC. And that is something that we are offering to our communities. And also just, again, more awareness and education about the risks of being on the internet, right? Unfortunately, there was nearly 30,000 reports to our Indiana Crimes Against Children Task Force this past year, which was almost a 40% increase from the year prior regarding internet crimes against children and exploitation. So this is a big issue, and it's just going to continue to rise with our ever-evolving technology and access that children have. So again, as Shannon mentioned, we really focus our efforts on what the data is saying because we want to try and get ahead of issues before children are abused and neglected. So where does this lead us? We have really talked about a number of the things that we are currently doing, but we also want to talk a little bit about the future of Pecan. We would welcome the opportunity to continue to expand our systems. We want to grow what works and again, have better collaboration and connection and partnership with various organizations and entities across the state, whether those are state agencies, local prevention partners, various communities, and also the various data systems that are in existence. With obviously our final goal being our kids, less kids in the child welfare system, more families supported, and everybody having access to resources. I like to say where I am from, we are a very resource-rich community. So I'm actually from St. Joseph County, and we have a ton of resources, but sometimes we don't talk to each other. And sometimes that connection and collaboration isn't there. And that is when our families slip through the cracks because sometimes I only have time for that one phone call to ask for support. And if I get shot down in that phone call, I'm done trying to ask for help. And so helping to ensure that there's really clear collaboration and connection across our state to ensure that nobody's slipping through the cracks and we have a no wrong door approach. Any questions?
Thank you.
I
Any
have a
questions?
question.
Sally?
So I feel like one of our tasks as this commission is to break down barriers. So I see that we don't have councils in all 92 counties. How can we help? Right. I don't know what those barriers are to getting those lifted up, but I think that's a role we could help with.
Yeah. So currently, I believe it is 52 counties or 52 councils covering 63 counties. So some of our councils also more in like rural areas will have like 2 counties come together to make 1 council. Any organizations in those communities that are interested in starting a council, send them our way. We are happy to meet with them, talk with them, and connect with them about the resources and kind of support them in that journey. So we have currently 4 councils like in development. So they're not on the map yet, but they're getting around, getting all their ducks in a row to officially start. So that is another big priority of ours is growing because we do want to have representation in every community. So again, there's that shared network of resources, knowledge, and experience. So they can either go to our website, there's a form to submit interest, or you can just send them directly my way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a comment, not so much of a question. I was fortunate enough to meet with our federal partners recently, and they shared data across the country about which child welfare agencies do the best in protecting kids and which states our kids are safer. And one of the striking things that I saw was that those that were doing really well had a very connected and coordinated prevention. And so I look forward to working with all of you, and I thank you for what you're doing. And I have my Water Watcher badge up by my pool, ready to roll. So I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Side note on the Water Watcher badge, I thought this was really cool. A family actually explained to us how they used it. Their child is on the autism spectrum, and often those kids elope. So they made a rule with their kiddo, you wear this and you can't get in the water unless you've handed it to mom or dad. And that helped the kid visualize that like, oh, this is on, I can't get in the water. I can't do anything until I give it off to my safe adult, which I thought that was such an amazing way to use the Water Watcher badge as well.
I think DNR has a water safety program, and I just wonder if like we could connect with them to get those badges to people too.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah. I think any way we can get them out into the community. We're obviously bringing them to our events and
Yeah, yeah.
tabling and things like that. And you can go to our website and like order however many you want. So we've had school corporations order hundreds of them. And we just ship them out free of charge across the state. So yeah, that would be another great partnership. I
Yeah.
would agree.
I did have one more piece of data, and I apologize, I didn't bring the exact number, so you'll get a little bit of a generalization here. But as we were looking through our performance improvement plan and collecting data and doing case reviews, one thing that stood out to me is that we remove infants under the age 1 at 3 to 4 times more rate than any other child. Which, if you think about it, they're the most vulnerable, so it makes sense. But I think it is a piece of data that would allow us as a coordinated system to really think about how do we work with moms when they're pregnant? How are we keeping kids safe early on? So just a bug in your ear that maybe we could start to talk about some prevention efforts.
I would love to talk about that because the other team that I oversee at the Villages is our 0 to 3 team. So that is right up my alley.
Wonderful.
Any other questions? I guess, not a big regulation guy, but would it be possible, and I don't know if the pool manufacturers or installers or somebody gets a permit to say they have to go through some type of training?
I think that would be wonderful. Another one of the things that I didn't mention that we would love to do is also create some type of like a credentialing for organizations to like deem them as like child safe because they've completed certain courses or those kinds of things. So maybe it's not like a requirement, but maybe it's like, hey, I'm going to go with this program, this partner provider, because I know that they have received the proper training and education on this topic, such as water safety or even, recognizing and reporting abuse and neglect for companies and having family safe policies and those types of things as well. Yeah, I think that would be wonderful.
And I know Angie Skorkin with Child Advocacy Center in our community, the Casey Center, but and I know she gets in her communities and her schools and talks about, are we doing that statewide or do you know?
Yeah. So are you talking about the child safety education that she does? Because she does Monique Burr. Yes. So one of our partners is Not Today. So Not Today leads an Indiana Prevention Education Coalition as well. And so Angie is at one of our child advocacy centers up north. And so she goes into the schools and provides prevention education to all of our kiddos, ages K through 12, I believe, within a specific school system. So one thing we are partnering with the Indiana Prevention Education Coalition on right now is figuring out where those gaps are, where there's certain communities not being served. So we have a lot of our councils and a lot of other prevention organizations are doing that work, but there are communities where there are gaps. And so they have actually created a platform, it's called The Bridge, to kind of show exactly what schools, what communities are covered and which ones aren't. So then PCAN can help supplement and go into those communities where there isn't council coverage or there's not a prevention provider doing that child safety curriculum. Yeah.
I guess, Shannon, if going back to your presentation of your friend growing up, if you were aware of what was going on, you had a contact, you could have maybe helped her.
Yeah, I think about that a lot because again, it was the 70s in rural Indiana and I didn't even know what CPS was. That wasn't even a term I ever heard. I never met a social worker. There were no social workers in the school, so I think about that a lot. I think about that a lot in everything that I do, and particularly in rural communities too, that lack resources. So yes.
Are we struggling with the Department of Education getting this message out to all the schools, or do we know? Is anybody from the DOE with us yet? No.
I know that after our kickoff event on April 1st, I talked, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget her name.
It's worse when you get
Chief Strategy Officer Jacqueline Cronk. I was getting there. I talked with her and she connected me. And so we sent some resources out for them to distribute to their schools in their newsletters about how to get connected to PCAN and also the Prevention Education Coalition to ensure that we are getting those programs into the schools. I know that's a requirement of the schools now to cover internet safety as well as the many other safety curriculums that they have to do. And thankfully in our state, most of our providers that are doing that prevention education in the schools are using a comprehensive curriculum. So it hits bullying, internet safety, abuse and neglect, sexual abuse, all the components with like a simple framework. The one that we typically uses Monique Burr, and it uses 5 safety rules. So it's really simple for kids to apply these 5 safety rules in all of these different scenarios. So I think that that would be something we could continue to grow and strengthen in that relationship with the Department of Education, because I think sometimes the schools don't think about connecting with their local council or prevention partners, but that is definitely something we could grow in.
And I would say you've seen one school and what they're doing. You've seen one school and what they're doing. I mean, there's Department of Education and what the statute says that has to happen, and it'll look very, very different in different school systems, depending on resources, depending on champions in the schools, et cetera. So that is certainly part of it.
It has an impact too on the safety of the children. I know. So before I joined Pecan, I worked at a local council in Elkhart County, and we had all the schools providing all different kinds of curriculums. They were building themselves, and there just wasn't a lot of continuity and clarity over how children were being informed. And so we actually rolled out education in all 7 school corporations within that county so that all kids were getting the same curriculum. And we saw an increase in children being able to actually communicate what was happening to them in their CAC interviews. And then an increase in some of those ability to criminally charge and prosecute as well in that community.
You mentioned the 59 kids that died, right, from abuse and neglect. And, there's another 41 kids last year that died just from bullying and suicide. So we got about 100 kids a year that are losing their life because of evil in our communities. And we just got to do a better job, right? And we put a lot on our teachers. This is where the kids find school to be a safe place, right? So, I mean, I don't know. We got to do better. So the next 100 are pleading with us.
I think it's definitely a natural partnership for us to work closer with schools, because teachers need to be able to teach. Yes, they can be that safe adult, but to have them also be responsible for providing the curriculum and what have you, that's where we can partner with them and have them sit in on those trainings so that they're hearing it too, and they know, the terminology the kids are being taught. So then there is really clear collaboration and communication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, Handle with Care, presentation by Chelsea Irwin and the Youth and Family Programs Director.
Thank you, and thank you all for having me today. As mentioned, my name is Chelsea Irwin. I'm the Youth and Family Programs Director with the Indiana Department of Health. In my role, I really work with community partners to better understand what adverse childhood experiences are, expand education around that area, as well as work with them to identify opportunities to support children. And so, Shannon, your story, I think, is a really good segue into what I'll be talking about today, which is the Handle with Care program. And this is our biggest program within our work that we're doing on our very small but mighty team to support children who have been exposed to trauma and violence. So as always, our mission is to promote, protect, and improve the health and safety of all Hoosiers. And our vision is that every Hoosier reaches optimal health regardless of where they live, learn, work, or play. So Handle with Care, this is a free program that communities can implement within their schools to support children who have been exposed to trauma and violence, whether that's happening in their home or within their communities. And so working with those partners, we're establishing a more formal framework to enhance that communication where those children are maybe engaging with first responders to ensure that schools are alerted through a confidential way that, hey, let's handle this child with care in a school setting. We know that when kids are experiencing these events in their home, in their communities, maybe it's even happening within schools, they're still going to school the next day or in the coming days. We also know that schools offer a really unique opportunity for us to connect those children with opportunities for intervention and hopefully support them in that pathway for resilience. So thinking about the individual partners that are a part of this program, our biggest partner is our first responders, law enforcement, fire, EMS. They're the ones who are at the scene. They're the first ones to see those children when they're called to an event where maybe it's domestic violence in the home, substance use, other forms of violence, search warrants, arrest warrants. they're the first ones to see those kids. They see them in the home. And we want to make sure that we are able to support that child who just witnessed something that could potentially interrupt their ability to learn, to thrive in an educational environment and within their community setting. So our first responders are the first to engage in this program. They are the ones to initiate that handle with care notification. And I'll talk in the next slide kind of what that process looks like for the notification. Our second partner in this program is our schools. They are the recipients of this confidential notification. They are being alerted to that child of saying, hey, handle this child with care. And then our third partner is our mental health partners. We know that every community looks very different in the resources that they have, rural communities versus urban communities, whether those services are offered within the school system, whether the schools are maybe partnering with community mental health partners. We want to make sure that we are able to ensure that if there is a child who maybe needs some further support that extends beyond the classroom, that those opportunities exist and that schools are aware of those partnerships. All right, so the notification, I'm going to say the word confidential so many times because really that's what we want to make sure is happening with this notification, that we are keeping that child's information confidential, but we are still supporting them with opportunities for support. So this notification is serving as a warm handoff. So oftentimes law enforcement who might be at the scene, who are seeing these children at those scenes, want to know what happens to that child. What is happening when they leave that scene? This is serving as that warm handoff for them to understand that, hey, I'm alerting someone that this child may have been victim to or witness to something. How can we make sure that they are getting support, even if it is just an extra set of eyes on this child? And with this program, we want to keep it confidential. And so that notification, it does vary by community how they send that notification. And in my role and in our coordinator's role, we work to provide technical assistance to those communities to identify a process that works best for them to share that notification. It is only collecting that child's name and age and sharing it with the school. There is no incident level information that is ever shared through that notification because we don't need to always know what's happening in order to make sure that we're supporting that child. And so we work with our first responding partners to understand, do not be the one to determine what's traumatic for that child. If you're unsure, send that notification because again, we're keeping it confidential and this is going to allow that school to be able to manage that notification and keep an extra set of eyes on that child. So the notification is going to be sent from our first responding partners first. What they're going to do is they're going to send that notification, again, sharing the child's name and age with the school. That notification is received by the school before the start of the next school day. Ideally, we want that to be sent to that school as soon as possible. And so we make sure that the appropriate staff within that school system are alerted. So we work with the schools to identify a dissemination plan so that they know once they receive that notification, there is a specific point of contact who is reviewing those every day, and they are able to send that to those who need to know. And what this notification does is it is just alerting staff, handle this child with care. Again, no incident level information is shared through the notification. They just know, hey, Johnny might be coming to school today and maybe he's a little bit off. Maybe he just needs a little bit of extra support. If we do see some behaviors that are stemming from maybe something that has occurred, we know that this child is not ready to learn. They are not ready to engage in the classroom in whatever events are occurring. They're not ready to be there because they're clearly there to get through the day and learning is not their top priority. So management of these notifications. I'm going to jump down to this last bullet point because I think this is incredibly important. When that notification is sent to that school, we are only alerting those who need to know. So that might be that student's classroom teacher. For some of our older kids, that might be a couple of them, but we are only alerting those that are directly engaging with that student. And so that is the role of the school to identify who that is. But we also want to make sure that it's those special individuals within that school system that have that connection with that student, who serve as that safe contact for that student. And the only thing that is occurring is they are just observing that student's behavior. There is no opportunity to engage with this child as a result of receiving that notification. We are observing with that additional piece of information to handle this child with care. And so when those notifications arrive at the school, there is a specific point of contact who is going to review those notifications and make sure that they are sent out to those individuals who need to know. And really, we want to make sure that we are just keeping an eye on those children. And should we need to provide some interventions, most of them are going to be those classroom-based interventions of additional supports, providing additional time for homework assignments. Maybe it's offering a space for regulation. A lot of times it's going to happen at that classroom level. But again, ensuring that for those kids who we do need to seek additional resources and support that extend beyond the classroom, that those connections are in place within the school system. This is a really important slide that we have pulled from our Handle with Care training. So with our schools who integrate Handle with Care within their school day, all of their staff is trained in the do's and do nots of this program. We want to make sure that they understand what the purpose of this is and what they should and should not be doing if they are alerted that one of their students received a Handle with Care notification. So it's really important that they understand that we are not asking questions. We are not playing the role of the investigator. This is not something that's additional for that educator. We are just alerting them, hey, let's just handle this child with care. Maybe you're going to see something, maybe not, but still, let's handle that child with care. And we want to make sure a lot of our educators are doing this. They're showing care, they're showing grace, but making sure that we are changing that perspective of the why behind that behavior, that there's an unmet need, there's something that's occurring to cause the behavior that you're seeing. How can we help to best support that student with potentially alternative options for the day or in the coming days? I also want to point out here that notifications should never be shared with anyone else. So again, they are taught that if they are the recipient of that Handle with Care notification, it is because they need to know. Handle with Care takes a whole school approach. So from the very beginning that we are working with schools and first responding partners to integrate this program within their community, we are taking a whole school approach. Everyone is involved in the process. They are a part of the conversation, the planning, as well as the training. We want everyone from the classroom to our bus drivers to administration level to be aware of this program and to know that their community is partnering to support children through this program. And when we're able to support kids through an environment that meets their needs, where maybe they're not getting those needs met elsewhere, we're building opportunities for resilience for them through building those safe, stable, and nurturing environments. And when they have these needs met within that classroom, it becomes a little less scary for them. They're able to self-regulate, and when they're able to do that, they're able to learn and thrive academically. And so thinking about our program outcomes, this is really important to us that we want to make sure that we are meeting some of these program outcomes through this program. And so really at the beginning, when we start this program in our communities, we're really building on this process of sending those notifications. We're working with communities to address those gaps, those barriers to making those notifications. And so those short-term outcomes, we're going to see an increase of those notifications being sent. We're going to see an increase in an understanding of staff around adverse childhood experiences, around behavior that they see in the classroom. And we also want to see that data coming in, the notifications we're getting. What are we doing with those notifications? How are we helping to support those students who we're getting notifications for? And something that I haven't mentioned that I really want to make sure is said is that with these notifications that are coming in, yes, these are for our children who are having some sort of encounter with a first responder or with another community partner who has the ability to send those notifications. But we're really changing our shift here among our staff to understand that we're able to provide the support to any child who's walking through that school door, regardless if we've received a Handle with Care notification for them. And then as we move through those midterm and long-term outcomes, we really want to see a change in our school environment. How are we helping to support them in that learning environment where they do feel safe, where they do have the opportunity to regulate those emotions and those behaviors, where they can thrive academically? Again, remembering that when our children are coming to school and their nervous system is so overloaded, their ability to learn is severely minimized. They are there to simply survive the day, get through the day. they're not there to learn. But when we offer these opportunities for resilience for them in an environment where they are spending a large portion of their day, we offer them the opportunity to do so. So we're looking at improved attendance, overall improvement in those behavioral and educational outcomes. So where are we going next with Handle with Care? We're really excited to see how we can continue to expand this program. And so a little bit of background information on this program. I've been working in this area with Handle with Care for about 5 years. So from the very beginning that we have started piloting this, I've been able to see how it's grown so far. So it first started as a pilot out of West Virginia. This is a national program that more than half of the states in the country have implemented within at least one county. We have some states that are statewide. We have some that are kind of starting those conversations and growing. And then it was picked up very quickly through their West Virginia State Police, who was able to expand this to a statewide program and expand it nationally. Today, as of today's date, we are currently in 38 counties with 80 school districts currently receiving Handle with Care notifications from those community partners and law enforcement. These are schools who are being alerted to those children who are our most vulnerable, who are our at-risk students, who are able to better understand the impact that trauma and adversity in our community can have on those kiddos. We do have about 15 counties who are currently engaged with us to continue conversations on implementation. So looking at this map here, you'll see that our dark blue counties are the ones where we are currently located. We have a Handle with Care program in at least one of the school districts, with those lighter blue counties, the ones where we are engaged in conversation. And that timeline varies and where we're at in those conversations. It might be that we are just starting out and we're talking with those community partners, or we are working through those final stages of implementation. I also wanted to share with you just a quick number on how many Handle with Care notifications we have received. In 2025, these are individual children across the state where a Handle with Care notification was reported to us. There were 10,883 students. Just take a moment. Those are individual notifications that were sent to schools where a child was encountered at a scene where law enforcement, fire, EMS were present. And those are just the ones where a notification was sent. So imagine how many children we are not capturing. Just this year to date, we're already at 2,556. So where are our current priorities? We are at a stage where we feel comfortable with where we're at in implementation. We want to see how are we working? Are we meeting those objectives and those outcomes of the program? So we are currently partnering with the Indiana University School of Social Work to conduct an evaluation of the Indiana Handle with Care program. We are currently or about to kick off our phase 1 of this on May 1st. We are going to really be looking at partner engagement. How are those beginning stages of implementation going? How is the program kind of working through the process, ensuring that we are following the model of fidelity for this program, as well as looking at our Handle with Care training for our school and community partners. Is it working? What's not working? How can we improve? And then we'll enter into phase 2. This is really going to look at those outcomes that I showed you a couple of slides back. Are we meeting this? But also we want to know what's happening with those notifications. Again, we had 10,800 notifications who were sent last year. What's happening with those notifications? What level of intervention is being provided for those students? This is data we really want to know and be able to share with those community partners to better understand how can we further support these kids, but also what support is being provided to them as a result of this program. In my role and my coordinator's role, we offer technical assistance to all communities across the state. So we've kind of split the state up in half to best address this, but we provide all levels of implementation, technical assistance for programs to implement this program. We even look beyond this. So 2 priorities that we are really looking at is improving data collection. So again, looking at those outcomes, but what is happening as a result of those notifications being sent? How are we also sharing with those community partners that feedback on what's happening with this program that they've implemented within this community? Looking at sustainability and process improvements. So again, thinking of our model of fidelity for this program, are we ensuring that our communities who are implementing this program are following that model of fidelity, that we're seeing those successes where we want to see those successes, but also what gaps are we seeing? How can we help to support communities in addressing those gaps? And then third, statewide expansion. So this has been a goal, obviously, throughout this whole process, is how can we continue to expand this program, bring awareness that this program exists, that it is a free program that communities can implement to support those children. And so we continue to have these conversations to present on this program, to really just put ourselves out there and increase our visibility of what this program is and how it can be effective. So this is where we're at currently, and looking at also who is missing from the table. Where can we pull in some of those other partners who are engaged in this work to share notifications, to just be a part of those conversations, to serve as partners for those schools who are looking for some of those resources to support their children? So I think I went through that a little fast, but I would love to open it for questions.
You did good. So I know statewide is critical, right? So to try to get it to everybody, so every child community deserves,
Yes.
to be protected. But I know, and I'm going to call her out here because Hannah Joy's with us here with IARCA. But Hannah, when she was my LA, we had the trauma training bill that we dealt with, and so to our students to go to school to get their teaching certificate had to have a semester of trauma training. So I guess I would encourage you to maybe touch base with their higher education to say, what are you teaching in that trauma training?
Yep. Great feedback. Thank you.
And if that can, you can collaborate and coordinate with that. So we'd love to, we thought about trying to get the trauma training to every school corporation in Indiana, but not everybody was on board, right? It's a big task, and we do put a lot on our schools, but the schools that did it were they're excited about it. And so I just think the more we can get the awareness out there, that's good. But we started at least with the students.
Yes. Yes.
When they become a teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to see what they're learning.
Yep.
And what they're teaching at that college level.
And that's a great intervention point for them as well, kind of before they're getting into working in the schools.
Sure.
Great advice. We will look forward to connecting with them further.
Any other questions?
I guess 2 questions really. So to piggyback off the chair's sort of comment point there, on the data collection piece, do you have a way of distinguishing between the outcomes that would have been achieved anyway because of the trauma training that's happening versus those that are being achieved because this program's in place?
That's a really great question. We are not collecting that data. That's why we've pulled in IU to be the brains behind that for us. I would love to take that to them because I don't think that was a consideration that we had in those conversations, but that's a really good point.
Okay, and then thank you very much for that. And the second piece is on the statewide expansion. You mentioned that it's free for schools. Is it free for schools now with a fee to come later, or what is sort of the funding plan for that? Are they signing up for something that they're going to be paying for 2 years from now or whatever?
No, this is a completely free program. So thankfully, I exist to provide that technical assistance, but to that community level, everything is free for them to do. They could do this on their own, but we have found that when we do have that kind of oversight of it, we're able to ensure that they are following the model of fidelity instead of straying a little bit away from that. But no, it is completely free to them with no future consideration for investing in it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So just to expand on that a little bit. So how is it currently funded? Because I assume the technology, right? Is there federal funding that is around?
No,
the state appropriation funded?
There is not. So currently, how notifications are sent, we work with the community to identify a best way to do it. We want them to integrate it into a process that they're already doing. We typically have communities who utilize like a Google form. So the schools serve as the owner of that, and they can send that as a QR code out to those program partners to send those notifications. However, as we look at statewide expansion, we would like to have a shared system so that those notifications are able to be sent more timely, and we're not duplicating those efforts in every single county that we're going into. We're going to see a lot better buy-in if we're approaching them and saying, hey, the system already exists. Do you want to opt into this? So our goal is that, eventually we're able to have funding that can support a statewide expansion of this program. But at this time, we do work with what is free for that community.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am.
I want to start off by saying that this seems like a great program. I was looking at the map where you have the counties the districts that are doing it. Do you know if Marion County is doing it? Is that the light blue? I was trying to.
It is light blue. That is more complicated just because it's so expansive. We have so many school districts, districts that include different districts of school districts, but also thinking about those first responding agencies. We have several conversations going with Decatur Township, Lawrence Township, about how we can maybe serve as pilot sites for the program within those communities. So we are trying to connect further with, IMPD and some of those law enforcement partners who are a part of it and would eventually be a part of it. So they are light blue because we're having those conversations, and they're great conversations, and we hope that we'll be able to have it soon, but it would serve more as a pilot in Marion County first.
Okay, thank you. And you just answered my second question.
Oh, great.
Judge.
Yes, we just heard from Prevent Child Abuse Indiana. Have you paired with them?
Specifically to Handle with Care, we have not. We have had past conversations with Jeff when he was in that position, but we do need to revamp those conversations.
They're in more counties. That was my
Sure,
thought.
yeah.
But I just want to say that I think this is a wonderful program. I recall attending a national conference years ago and learning about this on the East Coast. But having prosecuted child abuse and neglect cases for 10 years, I can tell you that the teacher was often the sanctuary for those kiddos who have been in these circumstances. And I encountered over the years teachers who didn't know what was going on, and after the fact felt really terrible because they didn't see it. And I know that's because these teachers really love these kiddos. So I think this is a wonderful program. And I would love to see it statewide as well.
Seeing no other questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continuing on, we do have a presentation with Stefan Balka.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak here this morning. My name is Stephen Balco. I serve as a state attendance officer with the Indiana Department of Education. Primarily in my role, I work with schools and stakeholders and families. Work with schools and families and other stakeholders on technical assistance, guidance, and getting those resources out, highlighting the data that they're utilizing, and really try to just help them through kind of this chronic absenteeism struggle that we're all dealing with, and what does that future look like, and how can we make a more targeted approach. Part of that is that over the last several months, I had worked with Mark a little bit as well on getting signed on with the Attendance Works 50% challenge with a goal of reducing chronic absenteeism in Indiana by 50% over the next 5 years, which would land us just a little bit less than 8.5%, which would be a market improvement over where we are today. So how we get there is a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today, kind of some of the steps that we're taking, some of the things that we're highlighting to make that more attainable for schools. So, I won't run through all the data because I know that this group has seen the attendance data and the outcomes and what that looks like. But I did want to highlight at least this one example up here just to kind of show what we're talking about. It really looks the same across the board. is that those students that are not chronically absent do score higher on their tests. They perform better when we look at all of those other outcomes as well. So what we really want to do is continue this progress academically, and then provide schools and families and all the other stakeholders the resources to help them do that. So one of the ways that we really strive to do that is through our data and make sure that we're taking a data-driven approach. But we wanted to kind of move beyond highlighting to say, hey, you know, here's what your overall percentage is. Here's what this looks like. Here's the issue. It start to drill down more into the early warning threshold markers and say, what can we do to identify those kids before they're chronically absent rather than once we've marked them that way. And so part of that is to say, how can we use that data? The department has had for a while now the Attendance Insights dashboard, where you can go on, you can look at current and historical data, helps identify trends. You can look at calendars over years and start to see, you know, this particular Friday of this month, we see an uptick in absences. Is there something in our community? Is there something that's shifted that we need to be aware of that can help do that if all of our kids are being pulled, you know, maybe in one other direction? So there's a link to it in there as well, but really kind of helping to make sure you can get a clear picture of what's happening with your absenteeism data, particularly over time and trends, help to identify what works and how we can do that. We know that there are limited resources and staffing in our schools to track down every kid who is going to be absent. So being able to identify those who might be trending in that direction more quickly, you could target those resources to those kids. So to help do that, one of the things that we have created, and it's nearly complete, going through its kind of final review and quality control check there, is really guidance designed for all stakeholders. What we see is, you know, with attendance policies being locally driven, sometimes the language that we use starts to drift. It starts to change a little bit depending on where you are in the state. And so when we have schools and parents and courts and probation and all of these other folks involved in the attendance of a child, we want to make sure that all of the answers are coming from one source of truth, that we're able to direct folks to that common place so that we're all able to have that discussion. And so some of that we have highlighted up here. For schools, looking at the laws, the definitions, requirements, reporting how attendance fits in with accountability. For families, what are the requirements of families? Who's responsible for getting the student to school? What language is the school or the court's going to be using when this occurs? For the juvenile courts, how are the schools sending that there? Looks like a little bit that got cut off, but how is the data being used? How are those interactions? And, you know, in code, it talks about all of the requirements that are required before you can file for truancy. Even already, we see about 100 different ways of that being done across the state, with some of the courts putting that back on the school, some of the schools saying we don't have the capacity to hold those meetings, and then we sort of end up at an impasse. So really having this guide to help massage and walk through some options for that as well really kind of helps clarify some of those things, because I think a lot gets lost in how we approach that. One of the other new resources that we have sort of coming online now, working on identifying some schools to pilot this program. It's a free program, utilizes some machine learning, and it helps to identify early some kids who might be at risk of absenteeism. So similar to the Attendance Insight, but it will use more specific data to that child. So looking at what was their historical attendance rate combined with maybe what are we seeing over the previous couple of months for their attendance, and it might give a picture of what is the, I would say, risk level, but for, you know, to miss more school or to become chronically absent, Again, what that does is help free up those resources to target and direct into certain areas, not to necessarily preemptively punish a kid or something like that, but to say, hey, we're noticing that this is trending in this direction. Last year we had this many absences. You can reach out to the family and say, hey, what do you need? What's the missing piece? How can we help? So that way you're not having the kids being truant or not showing up at all. And lastly, we're really walking through and taking a look at all of the guidance and the memos that we had put out over the last several years and making sure that it still fits and it still is designed to be used and assist in the way that it should. And an example of this is the form that had been kind of commonly referred to as our certificate of incapacity. It's really a long-term doctor's note for kids who are expected to miss over 20 days of school. There had been a form that had been passed around. It was not an official form. It was one that was created, had some letterhead slapped on it. We're not really sure where it came from, but kind of emphasized the need for a form that schools could use to get the questions answered that they needed. And as we developed that and worked with our school nurse at DOE and our partners at Riley Hospital, and then internally with some of our other stakeholders with our foster youth and some of our other kids to say, hey, this document can also serve as an advocate for those kids who might be passing through the system at school and need to miss a certain amount of days for doctor's appointments. So we're starting to kind of make sure that all of those are aligning with our resource guide and how we're pointing at the data to say, hey, we want to reduce our attendance by 50% over the next 5 years. Here's the data. Here's the targeted resources that you can use to help achieve that. And then within all of that, we're having meetings with schools and holding training webinars and trying to solicit that feedback as well. And so I think I talked through that pretty quickly. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do you know if, like, I know we always look at other states as a barometer, how we line up with other states on absenteeism, or is there even that data out there?
I think we're kind of in line with everyone. I'm not sure how we compared directly. I know we're not an outlier one way or the other. So
yeah. I didn't know if that data was even available. I know if parents are involved, and you got a chronic absentee child, but I know we did some things in our community that maybe put the parents at risk, so to speak. So it kind of straightened up a lot of students said, oh, I don't want my parents to be involved in this, so I'll go back to school. Any other thoughts or questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For being here. Next is our director, Mark, to give us a legislative session update.
All right. Well, happy to be here and give a little bit of an update on our past legislative session. Those who've been following it know it's a very fast moving one, but actually a very similar amount of bills as what we usually see flowing through that. So it kept us and especially our legislators quite busy. So I'm going to go through a few highlight items that were big tickets for the session that relate to the work I do or that we do in one way or another. But then also we'll have some discussions as we get further along about what this means for projecting our work on next session and early goals for legislative items. So one I want to start with, just because we always love seeing lived experience noted, is a fairly straightforward bill on the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. So that was Senate Bill 15, went through very smoothly. A lot of work with our partners in the foster care space, especially Foster Success, brought this one forward. And it just is simply, can we make sure that we have a statement about the rights of those foster youth going out to them, being posted regularly, being shared with their caregivers and foster parents? And can we make sure that involves lived experience voice of a youth that's been through the foster care system? So very important item. Again, a lot of this really falls in line with existing DCS practice, but it's formalizing it, putting on the same tier as when we talk about the Bill of Rights for foster parents and others. Let's make sure the youth are right alongside that. I think our one note on this as a commission is it'd be really great is when that gets drafted, that on that document itself, it indicates that this was created in collaboration with foster youth. So if you have a youth reading it, they know my voice is in here somewhere. And it's not just another bureaucratic piece of paper that goes in the bundle of all the pieces of paper that they're going to be seeing in their life. So a nice one to see moving forward there. Now, a larger bill that has a lot of stuff packed into it that I will not go through line by line. I see our DCS folks and others saying, please don't, because there's a ton. This is one I know some of our other groups will be talking about as well. So anybody that's a part of or looking to join our child welfare task force would know that we're probably going to have some more discussion on this one. A lot of items in here are cleanup of stuff that we worked on in recent years of kind of where's that line on informing all parties and making sure everybody has the information they need when they're a part of it. What do we have as far as some things to make sure that there's rules on post-adoption contact privileges for certain youth going forward through that? So again, a lot of straightforward things in there. And I won't read through line by line, making sure we have formal orders that really talk about the specific factors that are being considered when we make placements. So even though our judges always have a long list of things they consider, making sure that's reflected in what gets recorded by the court and that's out there and that's part of a process there. It does add some additional language on when we're looking at change of placement, and this is one of the bigger items you'll probably hear about, making sure we've got the language and understanding just right as this moves forward. So it does look at when there's an adoption petition and the child has been in their current placement for 12 months. Basically, we need to look at resolving that petition before we're changing placement. Now, some of the discussion on there is going to be clarifying and saying, well, what if the placement is trial home visits with the birth family? Things like that we want to say, well, hold on, do we just stop all process that's underway because an adoption's been filed, or are there things that we need to consider differently in that? So I think some of that's still very much to be determined as we look at the cases that get brought forward under these new rules, but they are currently in effect. This is one that did, upon passage, take effect. So a lot of little things packed in here that our friends at DCS and with the courts get to do the fun work of interpreting now and making sure we're matching the intent, that we're not disrupting a child's placement unnecessarily, that we're notifying everybody that all of the parties are able to be active and informed parties. Those are all the intentions of this. So it's the little pieces that go with that. They're going to be a big part. And they did provide, I mentioned earlier, looking at when they were evaluating out-home placements, what are the list of items that we're going to make sure we consider? Again, I would say almost everything on this list is current practice of things that get considered between the courts and DCS, but it is good to have it in writing and to note these things, especially if we're going to put out more publicly some of those findings, that we want to make sure we're going through this checklist carefully and that we're not missing certain things as we go through. So you'll see a lot of things in there that make sense. Is the caregiver interested in possibly becoming a permanent home? Does the caregiver have a relationship with the family? Hopefully positive. So if we're looking at kinship care and things like that, do we look at that as a consideration? Yes, we do need to evaluate and saying, is there something that could potentially be negative to the placement as well? So that's why that's kind of neutral language there. Proximity to birth home and child's school district, especially with our older youth, but we see it with some youth that are 7, 8 years old, where it's very common when they're placed in a foster environment to try to return home. And we have some very dangerous runaway situations, sometimes going across the state trying to do that. So sometimes just knowing home is closer and that visits are going to be maintained and things like that make it easier for the youth to say, okay, I'm safe here. I'm not being disconnected from all the things I've known in the past. Because again, a lot of children, you know, what's comforting them is often what they know, not necessarily where they are now and how much safer it is where they are now. And we need to balance that so we're not creating some of that additional trauma there. Again, other lists of things that got added in there. see, it looks like the clicker's skipping past one of mine, but caregiver willingness to interact with the birth family. So making sure that we are having positive dialogue when that's appropriate. Sometimes there's other factors involved in that. Potentially the willingness to accept siblings. So we're not splitting up sibling groups whenever possible. Or if there's a need to split a sibling group for various reasons, and sometimes there's offenses between siblings and things that we need to consider. But are they willing to say, okay, but we can help organize visits with that sibling and keep the connections going there? And of course, making sure that they're placed in a home that has the ability to take care of the needs of the child. So we look at special behavioral needs and other things that might be going on there. And then after that, of course, compliance with federal laws related to it. So nice to have that. I'm not always a fan of lists. You'll hear me rant about lists sometimes, but I think this is a good one to say that we make sure we've got a baseline of considerations that we always make. Okay, next up, Senate Bill 246 on redaction of court records. This is one that seems kind of small and simple, but actually piggybacks nicely with where we talked about with Handle with Care before, where there's that line of information that we make more public, and what information is better for the child if we keep a certain level of safe concealment of that information too. So in this one, it really says when we look at court records where we've got child victims, child witnesses, and other persons that are child attached to the case, we're making sure we have completely anonymous designators for those children in that public facing record. So a very common practice in a lot of areas is using initials. And that was an example for this and saying initials could be very telling, especially in a small community, especially if you've got initials where it's all the last initial is the same and you're talking about 6 parties. Well, now we have a good idea which family of 6 that might be. So these things do happen. And as much as we would think community members are always going to be safe, perceptive, and positive towards the children who are identified in that, unfortunately, that's not always the case. And we do see cases of bullying and antagonism and other things that come from that when it's discovered what the child's relationship is. This just says we need to replace that with something like child witness 1, child witness 2, make it as anonymous as we possibly can so we're not accidentally disclosing information that we should not be disclosing. I saw a case just a couple of weeks ago where, ironically, their initials were pronounced in the exact same way as their first name. So they were found out immediately by folks that they really didn't want to know about their case because, like, I know exactly what that is. They go by their initials. So think of somebody who goes by like JC or something like that and saying, well, I know exactly what JC is. That's what we call them. So there is a good value in this and saying as much as we'd like to think we're always going to receive appropriately, something like Handle with Care that's much more about just giving out very little information in a very targeted way is what we really want to see in our communities. So simple item, but a good one to make sure that we have in play there as we're talking about the risks of our youth. Okay. Moving on to a House bill. So this is a bill that directly talked about the Commission on Improving the Status of Children. So there was a very large bill on boards and commissions. They've been doing a lot of work trying to streamline, consolidate, look at where there's some more efficient ways to handle our various boards and commissions across the state. And we do have quite a number of them. So this one specifically referencing the Children's Commission talked about another entity, which is the Kids First Trust Fund Board. So their main role is being the advisory on the Kids First Trust Fund, which is one of the license plate funds. So if you have your Kids First license plate, I've got one of the OG ones that still got KF at the start of it. That's how you got one of the early ones. That's been doing a lot of funding for prevention efforts over the years. But it's also been looked at and saying, well, how can we elevate and get that more plugged in to the community of child abuse prevention at the same time and give them more resources? This is a board that doesn't have any direct funding or staffing or anything else. It's volunteer driven. I believe the fund itself is held currently at DCS, but they're kind of the fund manager. So this would take that board and say, let's put that under the Children's Commission. That happens next year, so we have some time on that. I will say I've already reached out to the current board to make sure we can make this a positive transition. A lot of them are interested in coming over. We'll probably look at, do we create that as a separate committee under the commission? But a nice vehicle, it does have some funding. Now, when they started, there were like 10 specially licensed plates, and now there's like 35,000, including ones for people paying extra just to have their black background, which has become enormously popular, and I'm not entirely sure why. But there's a need for them to work on some increased visibility and getting it out there, and I think that's where we can really assist with that. Also, we get recommendations all the time that are good, solid prevention recommendations. We talked about a lot of prevention today and saying, you know what, this seems like a pretty natural plug-in the more we think about it. So we didn't ask for this, they didn't ask for this, but we look at it and we say, you know, we can support, we can elevate, we can help you find recommendations of items to fund with that and go through that. I know a lot of their funding goes through the Child Abuse Prevention Councils locally. So talking about a lot of the elevation of the work that we heard about earlier today would make some real sense. So what can we add to that? How can we improve the value of that group and hopefully get visibility up there where, you know, more of those plates are out there, spreading the word about child abuse prevention and getting the funding moving up again. So again, something every now and then we get one of those things we didn't ask for, that we look at it, we think it through, and we say, you know what, I think there's a good partnership here. So between that board and the Children's Commission, partners like Prevent Child Abuse Indiana, I think we have a lot that we can do to really make this a win for all sides. So look forward to hearing more about that as we get, yes, it's a year away, but a year flies pretty fast when we're talking about all these moves that we make on these things. So that'll be something that I think I'm excited about what we can do there. All right. Another House Bill 1036, Children of Need of Services. This one got a little bit of attention as well. It is, for the most part, taking policy that really is something that is a DCS practice already, but there were some cases that look like something may have fallen through the cracks a little bit. So it simply says before closing out an assessment or dismissing or terminating a pending CHINS case, we have to have eyes on the child 30 days prior. I don't think anybody disagrees with the need to do that. It did raise some very good discussions, though, because sometimes there's the misunderstanding that DCS has a police power where they can just knock on the door and say, you have to let me in. But it can be more complicated than that, where they have to go and actually get the local police to come out with them and produce the child. And it can be a very difficult situation, but this just makes sure that we're doing that as a standing practice, that we find a way to do that, and we can't end a case until we've done that, because we don't want to have a disastrous case where a child that if we had just seen them, we would have known things aren't as good as we're being told they are. Right. I don't think anybody wants that. And the more we can stay ahead of any of those cases, the better for sure. So that got brought into play. Another important one, looking at child services matters, House Bill 1257. A few different things in here. It does add some more members to the statewide Child Fatality Review Committee. I know I sit on that committee, but it adds the ability for some legislative appointments to that as well. And the idea being that that committee does think of a lot of good recommendations. It usually is, again, meeting well after we're talking case closure, a lot of data collected, a lot of information, and saying, what do we do preventing this happening again? But that is a great place, I think, for legislators to be there at the table and be able to say, this is something, if we need to make a legislative fix, let's be at the table from day one where we're discussing this, so we can be an active part of it and get on top of it, because we want to be. So I think we'll see some very good matches there as we go into there. Talks about some other items on public disclosure on child fatality information. I know there was discussion on this, again, going back to our discussion with Handle of Care and other ones, saying we've got to be careful about identifying information that was public. When there's a fatality, there's often surviving siblings, for example, that may not want all of their information out there in the world. Right. So this does put some guardrails of it, of when it can be more limited, but when there's information that needs to be out there that the public does have the right to know about and the right to react to. It also adds something that I think flew under the radar a little bit for some folks, but the ability for DCS to clarify information in the public. So this has been an issue that's come up more than once, where we see one side of a report, one version of a report, one party that's being very active and vocal about how they feel things unfolded. And there may be additional information that the public really does need to hear. And in the cases where, you know what, DCS did do everything they could Yeah, DCS should have the right to say, you know, our workers were there, they did the things. Here's the reality, the clear facts of the case. And now here's the things we would love to see changed, so we don't have to face those same group of facts again. But let's be a public part of the discussion. Oftentimes, when you have an entity, a state agency that has some very difficult stuff they work with, and their only response is, we can't comment, people make assumptions. And we want DCS to be able to partner with the community and partner with the media and partner with others that are interested in saying, how do we keep doing better? So being able to let it get a little closer to an actual dialogue, I think, is a big part of that. So I know there's some folks, especially over at DCS, they're excited to say, at least now we have the ability to be a part of that and be active in those spaces. And also directly own when a mistake happens, you know, because they want to be able to own it too. So I think we see some really good things there going forward. Last one I'll talk about today, because I know we still got a bunch more stuff to get to on the agenda, but we did have House Bill 1303. This started as, you probably heard it referred to as Haley's Law, and then there were some changes and evolution throughout legislative session. The big item this does, it takes some crimes and offenses related to child sex abuse material, child pornography, and puts it into its own separate section of code and elevates some things, adds some new ability and charges there. Before, a lot of times there were ways you could interpret code where child pornography, child sex abuse materials would be more of an aggravator on top of something that was already there. So, okay, we found this, but it involved a child under the age of 18. We found this, but it involved this other aggravating factor that looked like child abuse. So it separates that out a little bit and allows it also to stack that charge in there. So we can be more directed on what we're trying to do and prosecute those. But the bigger part that came directly from Haley's Law was also looking at how do we identify children that aren't necessarily by letter of the law under abduction, but are missing, and we have reason to believe they are in danger. So when you look at your human trafficking cases, you look at your grooming cases, you look at the cases where they may, for that first step at least, go willingly, and now they're missing, what do we do? Because they don't fit this nice box over here. So what I did is add to the Silver Alert program, which it was usually used for endangered adults, looking at when you see cases of Alzheimer's disease and other things and some of those wanderings. It was used for that, but now it adds in, we can take these missing children, that the mere act that they are missing and they are a child is something that we can elevate, and put those extra eyes out in the community for them. Because we know once, especially in human trafficking and grooming cases, once they get one step removed from that initial contact, it gets really dangerous and really hard to get them back safely. So just gets that extra piece. There were some other pieces with Haley's Law that weren't captured in this end piece. And our next speaker will talk a little bit more about what some of the future looking on that is, because there's also that desire for online protections and online safety, saying this is good, but the event happened. If we're going to Silver Alert, it happened. How do we dial it back from happening? Because the risk is already tenfold if we know they're out there in the community with somebody we don't want them with. Right. But a really good start on that. I'll save the rest of the stories on that for our next speaker, though. So Sierra, our current MSW intern with the commission, who's almost done with us. So I had one last chance to make her get in front of everybody and do a lot of talking and all that fun stuff, because we love to give them meaningful experiences / torture before they leave with us. So I'll welcome her up next, unless you have questions on any of the bills that I covered just now.
Oh, Representative?
Yeah.
Really, if he doesn't, you tell him.
Hey, somebody got to issue a handle with care notification.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sierra Swozy. I am Mark's intern, and I'll be wrapping up next week, actually, and then I'll graduate with my MSW. So I'm really excited. It's been a long time coming.
Where
But
do you go after this?
after, I'm looking into potentially applying to be a legislative intern. So we'll see how that goes. But but I'm here to okay, I'll take note of that. I am here today to talk to you all about some of the bills that I talked about at the last meeting and how they all ended up. Again, all these bills are directly related to our suicide prevention, bullying, and online safety task force. So we've put all of these bills in front of them, got some feedback from them, which I'll share a little bit about with you all today. Again, where everything ended up at, and then we can talk about some next steps. So the first topic is age verification for social media use. At the last meeting, I talked about SB 129, age verification for access to social media, and HB 1178, minor access to social media. But both of these bills are inactive. They did not pass. However, there's one I didn't talk about that has the same language about establishing a minimum age for youth to access social media. And then if they are below that age, they would have to get that verifiable parental consent, which would be like in the form of submitting a guardian's ID to a social media platform. But the one I didn't talk about was SB 199, Education Matters. This one went on quite a journey. At its conception, it had this social media language in it, but the Senate amended it out. And then when it switched over to the House, it was amended back in. And then during conference committee, it was amended back out again. But it landed in now House Enrolled Act 1408, Education Matters, where it did pass. So long story short, it passed in House Enrolled Act 1408. But some of the specifics of this bill are that youth have to be 16 and older to create an account on a social media platform. If they are younger than 16, they have to get that verifiable parental consent. It lists some qualifications for social media platforms that would have to abide by this legislation. And then it also lists some addictive features that are harmful to the development of youth, which I found interesting. Some of them were the continuously loading content, like and share counts. And there has been a little bit of pushback about the verifiable parental consent piece, just because it's pretty easy for a youth to obtain their parents' ID and take a picture of it and submit it. So there's a little bit of a loophole, but the authors did kind of acknowledge this during session and just were prioritizing getting some legislation out that addresses the issue of youth safety on social media platforms. And then we've also seen some rollout of teen accounts from social media platforms, which has been interesting as I looked into the details of these accounts. They don't seem to quite align with the legislation, so it'll be interesting to see how all of that ends up and if any changes come from those. Yeah. So the next topic was the student phone usage in schools. The bill that passed here was Senate Enrolled Act 78, Wireless Communication Device Policy. This was the bill that established the bell-to-bell phone ban in schools, and it also required schools to implement a no device policy or a secure storage policy. This bill mainly kept the same language throughout session, had a couple of small amendments. There are some carve-outs for students with disabilities, students that have IEPs. Basically, if they need any sort of accommodation in the form of a device, they would be able to have that. But There was a concern brought up during our last suicide prevention, bullying, and online safety task force meeting about, say, for example, if a student has an IEP and they're using a device as an accommodation, it might be signaling to other students that they have an IEP. So it's kind of a little bit of a gray area there where we want to continue to accommodate students without kind of signaling them out. And then there's another concern raised during the session just about funding for these kinds of secure storage devices, or even like a lack of infrastructure like lockers to use as the secure storage devices. But it was recommended that schools use like a safety fund. So it'll be interesting if that works out or if there's potential need for some sort of fiscal to be attached to this. So the next bill is the doxing bill. It was renamed to now Senate Enrolled Act 140, Public Safety. This was the bill that defined doxing as the posting of personal information of a targeted person with the intent to cause them harm. And then the part of the bill that we were most concerned about was the language about if a third person then came in and acted upon the information that was doxed to cause the targeted person serious physical harm, then the person that doxed the information would receive a felony. And after doing some research into this, we found that doxing is a fairly common practice among youth. And we know during their developmental stage, they're pretty impulsive. So we were just worried about the possibility of this legislation giving felonies to youth. However, fortunately, this bill was amended to be moved into the intimidation statute to include doxing, which completely cleaned up the language about getting a felony if someone acted upon the doxing. So now, if you dox someone with the intent to threaten them, you can be charged with intimidation. And there are increased penalties if the person doxes a legislator, just because this bill came about because of the doxing and swatting that was happening during redistricting. So it's great to see this legislation passed with also having a mindful approach to youth. But I think this also sparked an interesting conversation about how do we discourage bullying behavior without criminalizing it. And then the last couple bills I'll talk about are about bullying. Now, these are both inactive. They did not receive a hearing. Mostly because the session was so short, but also because the spotlight was mostly on the phone and social media bills. So the first one we have is HB 1093, Student Bullying and Abusive Behavior. This one revises the definition of bullying to include school staff. And it also requires schools to report incidents of bullying and abusive behaviors, as well as what interventions were used. And then they would submit a report at the end of the year. And then the second one is HB 1107, Bullying Oversight Committee and Ombudsman. This one establishes bullying oversight committees at each school corporation and also a state bullying ombudsman's office in the Department of Education. Again, neither of these received a hearing, but it does there is an important conversation to be had, I think, around bullying reporting. And I think both of these bills touch on that. After looking at the most recent bullying reporting data, there's definitely a pretty large gap in schools reporting accurate bullying data, which leads me to my next slide. What are some of the next steps we can take? I have a couple questions on here for discussion or just for you all to think about as we move into the next few months. The first is, what kinds of online safety prevention measures could the SISC support? And the second is, what are potential ways to reframe the punitive aspects of bullying incident reporting to encourage accurate data collection from schools? Thank you.
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had some very interesting discussion. I have reached out to DOE and looked at some of the data because it's for those that have been part of it, it's not a foreign discussion to say, look, we have 90% of schools saying 0 incidents of bullying. We also know in our minds is saying that can't be correct. I don't know if there's a lot of schools that can say that for 1 week, let alone ongoing, right? So something's mismatched in that definition, but also as being treated. Going back though to our work on chronic absenteeism, I think we've learned some really strong lessons where we treated absenteeism as it's a data point that the school collects, but we're an all part of solving this, right? Because so many of the factors come from the community and come from other locations, well outside the school day. We just see the empty seat there. Bullying has a lot of similar aspects, plus there's so many pieces of bullying that are happening outside of the school day anymore. That it seems like maybe a reframing, more of a community response, and definitely getting away from anything that would indicate that the school is doing something wrong by acknowledging bullying incidents. Because that's us saying the school somehow created the entirety of the issue, instead of saying the school's a great place to work on it and deal with it and put in interventions. But we need the data so we know where to intervene and how to intervene. So for me, I think that's been a big eye opener as we've worked on other issues, that we need to own it in a different way up front and then reframe how we look at that data so we can have good data partners with the schools and we can offer supports to the schools, similar to the ombudsman bill that was noted there, saying, well, can we create an infrastructure at a state level that brings supports to the local schools? So we're partnering instead of just pointing out you have a problem in your school.
All right. Thank you.
Any questions? Comments?
Thanks.
Thank you for putting up with Mark as an intern.
No problem.
If I can help you with the next phase of your life, let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, next is our director. Discussing, are we talking about baby courts?
Yep.
Team
Just
implication.
kind of a few of our wrap-up items here as we go through. So I've been told that Representative Summers too is starting an intervention to prevent state government involvement from Sierra. So really feels that's trauma-inducing. So. But do have a few updates. One going into a little bit more detail on a new project that we've attached ourselves into a little bit. So you may remember some discussion over the last few years on the concept of safe baby courts. Now, this was based on some national models that are out there. Technically, the long name is Safe Baby Court Team Approach. Most of the modeling has come through some financial support through Casey Family Programs and the 0 to 3 initiative. So this is something that got the attention of our state legislature a couple of sessions ago, and we passed legislation saying we should have these. And essentially says when there's a 0 to 3 case, so when those really young kids, and we've already talked about that a little bit here, we know the risk factors are greater. How do we respond when we have those, especially in the form of a CHINS proceeding? So I was brought into a couple of discussions on this because noting there had been some difficulty getting it off the ground and finding courts that were interested in doing this. So when the legislation was created, I won't go into a huge background on it, but it created it in a part of code under problem-solving courts. Problem-solving courts generally are very regimented, certified entities that work on very specific issues. So we've seen that with some of our veterans courts, family recovery courts, drug treatment courts, and things like that usually fall under that umbrella. Safe baby courts were added in there as well as kind of the place in code where it made the most fit. But in that process, it also got a little bit misaligned that the only way to get a Safe Baby Court team together was going through this formal certification process. And also that there'd be some courts, they're like, well, we already have this form of problem solving court. Now we've got to decide between the two where they're going to go. And because they have a 0 to 3, but we have substance use and all these things. And it made it more cumbersome, I think, in their mind than we were wanting it to be. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of things we're doing really quickly, and we're working with all the partners have been doing this for a long time, much longer than us, but we saw a chance to do some realignment. So within the Indiana Office of Court Services is where we have some of the problem-solving court team groups that work on that, but we also have a division that works on children and family issues specifically. It's where our CASA program is at. It's where we look at guardianship. It's where the Children's Commission is actually administratively housed. Child welfare improvement efforts are housed as well. That has a little bit more of the expertise related specifically to these young children. So we are looking at making a shift to say, let's couch it under that team so we can have the right experts at the table. We're also looking at that bigger question of if it's not being taken up in the form that was initially presented, did we present it in the right form? The Safe Baby Court team approach, actually, all the research says it is going to be different everywhere. Depending on the resources, depending on the size and caseloads. We've got some Chicagoland area ones that they have an entire court that's based entirely on the 0 to 3 cases. But they've also got the volume to do that in a way that makes sense. I actually had Sierra do some initial research for us on this and confirmed and saying even states that have multiples, every county that's doing it has it a little bit different. So this is where we really need to look at saying, what do we need to create that makes sense for our Indiana courts and across different communities? So we're looking at transformation to take this more into an overlay of best practices, model practices, even model court orders and things that would be attached into when you have a 0 to 3. What that will allow is for courts that already have some kind of problem-solving court or complex problem-solving system in place, this overlay can come in and say, but you've also got a 0 to 3, make sure you're checking these boxes. For others that need something more regimented, we can bring in broader supports in that and saying, okay, so this case, we know we can really focus in a little bit more directly. So the courts at the Supreme Court level can develop these tools and systems of support form. The Villages actually has a coordinator that's being funded directly to try to get some of these off the ground. And we have a lot of other partnerships with groups like the CASA program. First Steps is a big part of this, Healthy Families, and of course our legislative partners, because it sounds like we might have some retuning to do where we go back and be like, we thought we had it right. And maybe it's just a matter of tweaking a word here or there to make sure we've got it just right. But very confident that we can actually get those off the ground now. So be looking for me talking about it more as we go through. I think our Child Welfare Task Force that's meeting this afternoon will probably chat about it a little bit as well. But the more that we talk to some of the people that were just looking for who do I talk to about what here, we realized this CISC really needed to jump into the middle here and see what we could do in our work as coordinating across so many agencies and entities to get these off the ground the right way. So if you talk to any folks that want to know, hey, what's going on with those, feel free to send them my way, and I can link you up to some of the other contacts that are working on those as well. But I'm confident that we have a path forward now, and really something that in retrospect, well, we would have loved to have been attached to it sooner, but we're glad we are now, and we think we can do some really good work there. Any questions on that?
Mark, can you describe just generally the need for tweaks or what that might look like?
Yeah, and some of them might be just really what I was describing, where since it was put in the portion of the code about problem-solving courts, there's a difference in problem-solving courts where there's a section of code in Indiana code that says problem-solving courts, and one of the things on the list may be a Safe Baby Court. And then technically there's a separate process for certification of certifying a court to be this specific type of court. I almost look at the difference between the two as, this is lowercase problem-solving court, this is uppercase problem-solving court certified. So we might want to just look at it, we can adjust that so we can note where those differences are at, because we've had with other types of problem-solving courts, communities saying, I can't go through all the certification stuff, but I want to take some elements of that. So can we look at a way where you've got two tracks, especially again, our really small communities they might only get 5, 0 to 3 cases a year. Basing a court literally around that model might be a lot trickier to do. But having a best practice manual, maybe not so much.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, hopefully it's just we're looking at minor cleanup so there's a better understanding of what we're doing with those.
Any other questions?
All right. I just had a minor update on the Youth Justice Oversight Committee, which has now become a committee under the Children's Commission specifically. That was in our last strategic plan. It was kind of spun off from us, and we talked about how we brought that back into the fold. So we have consolidated several of their groups into some of ours. So we're not having 6 groups that have very similar names on that. So looking at how we are taking items like diversion and transitional services, some aspects of their behavioral health work, and folding that into our existing committees. That's going along quite well. So we keep on getting that, so that flow chart is an efficient one that makes sense, where we're not having 3 of the same discussions on the same day. Also want to note, though, that the large part of what's left for their work is supporting getting the grants out the door that they were given funding from the General Assembly for. So it was a substantial amount, and it was focused on community alternatives, diversions, and behavioral health. The first couple of rounds, we saw a lot of communities, especially the smaller communities, that were saying, these grants are a whole bunch of work. We don't know if it makes sense for us to apply to a $20,000 grant when we've got to hire a $40,000 grant manager to do the work behind it. But the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute, who is behind the actual funding and disbursement of this, has done tremendous work paring down the requirements for that and looking at how we can have proper oversight without making it so burdensome that the exact people that we want applying don't want to apply. So I am happy to say that our initial round of grants that was when we first started this, where I think we had 8 or 9 even apply for it. And this last application cycle, we have over 40. So we're actually having to do grant reviews over 2 days because we've got so many of them. So things are starting to really look good, and the proposals are looking good. And there's so much based on community partnerships, schools wanting to get involved in the process, preventative oriented systems, a lot of really good stuff there. So we'll be looking forward to having some actual reporting of those folks that now have been working in these grants for a couple of years come and talk to us about some of the outcomes soon, because I think we're all anxious to see that. But I think we finally turned the corner on how do we get the word out there about these funds and make them approachable, attainable, and support them appropriately, so especially our small and rural communities are able to do this programming and get some good things in place on the ground. So really good news to see there. And then my last item for today is the very sad news that our coordinator, Blaine Cook, will be leaving us soon. No. I know he apparently feels that his one fiance that's moving to South Carolina to finish up her med school residency is more important than 1.5 million children in Indiana. But, you know, that's his math. I don't know. But no, we wish him very well on that. That is a big move, an exciting move. And the current weather that we've had changing every other day, I'm sure some of us are wishing we could make that move too.
Do we need a motion to allow him to leave?
I think that would be more of a form of something restraining him from leaving. So that's up to the judge. So he's been with us for a long time. You may know he started with us actually as an intern and moved into the role. He likes to say that he was technically here longer than me because I hired him off of his internship into the role. So I'll finally have seniority on the commission after this.
When's the last day?
He should be here for the next commission meeting. So we're working on the fine tuning tweaks and stuff because there's some stuff with the med school placements and all the stuff that move the timeline around. But we are actively looking for applicants. We just closed the application. We did have over 100 apply, and I can say a lot of really good ones. So I have the tough job of how many friends I'm going to turn into enemies by not being able to get them in the position, I'm sure, because it's going to be a tough choice. So we'll reach out if we want any folks partnering in to be a part of those final interviews and at least know who we're looking at bringing in. But so it will be very difficult to replace Blaine. He's built the position of coordinator and all the stuff that goes in the background, not just in this room, but with our hundreds of volunteers elsewhere. It is a huge amount of work to keep that on track, keep those groups going, keep them chaired and functioning, so we can have things to bring you here at this meeting. Because as you know, we're the tip of the iceberg in this room. There's so much behind the scenes on the commission. So we will miss him greatly for that. And we'll hopefully get to see him at our next meeting to say a more formal goodbye there. But again, things are moving forward. Our new person, hopefully, also we have funding to overlay them so they'll have some time shadowing directly with Lane in that transition. So fingers crossed we're able to make that happen and make it a smooth transition for everybody as we go through that. Otherwise, I think that's everything I have.
Very good. Any closing comments or questions?
I have one announcement that I learned of that rolled out last week. The Indianapolis Legal Aid Society has historically served the Indianapolis area, and they are expanding services statewide. So they will provide remote services statewide. And I think the particular niche area that will be of interest to this group is guardianship establishment. So think about those lower income families who are taking care of their kin and cannot afford a lawyer. This is a great alternative for that. So hopefully we won't have so many cases maybe lingering. In the Innochen's case, we'll have grandparents who take care of their grandchildren, able to get a lawyer to help get that legal establishment done. So I think that's wonderful news in this room.
Very good.
Thank you. Two items to call folks' attention to. One is we just updated our birth outcomes dashboard on the Indiana Department of Health website. We have updated data at the county level for birth outcomes, infant mortality, and others, which are great mechanisms to understand the health and well-being of a community. I'm really happy to report that our preliminary 2025 infant mortality rate has matched our 2024 infant mortality rate at 6.3 deaths per 1,000 live births, which maintains a historic low for the state. And that doesn't happen by magic. That happens because of the hard work and investment of everyone around this table and all the partners working together. So congratulations to everyone on that. The other thing I want to just put out there is the Sagamore Institute put out a report, I think just this week, on the state of young men and boys. It is a very interesting read. I recommend folks take a look at it. If you need that link, I'm happy to send it to you. It overlays a lot with the work that we're doing here, thinking about the impact of social media, thinking about the impact of relationships, and then on to fatherhood in raising the next generation of boys, which is important to me, not only, of course, in the spaces in public health, but also as a mom of two young boys. So I encourage you guys to take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please get that information and give it to him, and then I'll just circle it. Yep. Thank you.
And if I could just ask for everybody to indulge me just for a minute, I'd like to just pray for Jennifer in her new position. And I know she's going to need it, the prayer and support, and let's pray. Father, we just thank you for today. Thank you for just loving us and blessing Indiana. Father, we do stand and we lift up Jennifer in her new role, Father, as director of DCS. And I know the enemy would like to take her down. And so, Father, we stand and come against her, put armies of angels around her and her staff, her employees, and just help her to be effective. But Father, help this commission, put her out of business at the same time, Father. And we just ask for help us to be effective in children's lives and families' lives. And we ask it all in Christ's name. Amen. We are adjourned. Next meeting is June 17th.